Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Everybody, welcome into Going Public. I am Harry McCullough. This week we'll be talking about the Terrebonne Port Commission with the Executive Director of the Terrebonne Port. That is David Rabelais. So, David, welcome in, man. How's it going?
Good afternoon. It's going great. It's going great. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this time of year, I don't know if you guys have a season. Is there any time where they're busier than others, or is it all collective, like, hey, we gotta work all the time?
Well, wintertime, it slows down because you get those north fronts and north winds, and it gets rough. When the summer starts to set in the early to late spring, that's when the industry really cranks up, especially for the offshore sector,
right.
And they work diligently until you start getting fronts in again from the north.
Yeah.
Now, barring hurricanes, I mean, that's another problem that they have to deal with, right, like the one we're watching now. But yeah, so they'll scatter when a hurricane comes, and when it calms down, they come back in and start over again.
Yeah, and hopefully you don't have a storm come through, push all the silt into the canal and do things as
which happens. Right. It just gives the dredging companies more work, you know. So they don't like it, but it just creates economic development, which is what we're all about. You know?
We hadn't talked, but you got an interesting new boat that's over at Thomasy now. You got the destroyer that came in from Baton Rouge.
That's correct. The USS Kidd came in a couple of months ago, and I just talked to one of the guys today with Thomasy, and they were planning on putting it on dry dock this month, but they said it kind of got pushed into August, so they're going to pick it up.
It'll stay with us for a little while.
Yeah, they're going to pick it up in August, and I think they got like 9 to 12 months worth of work to do on it once they get it picked up, and so they're going to paint it. They're going to do a lot of stuff. It's going to look nice when it sails out.
Yeah, we had talked to some of the people with the museum from Baton Rouge,
right,
and just the camouflages they're going to put on, and they're going to change some of the colors.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Well,
go back to the original.
Right. Bill Purvis was on a couple months ago, and he's the one that he's actually my board president right now, and so I met with him today on some port information, and we discussed it just briefly, but he said they were going to probably put it up on the dry dock in August. Nice. and start the work. So I think it's going to be something to see.
Yeah, good to see a historic.
And they actually took the guns off, and I think they're sending those off, and they're going to get repainted as well. So they're not live guns, but to
get it back to the historic look.
Exactly. They want to put it back to its original look is what they're trying to do.
Oh, that's cool, man. That's really cool to have something here where they're doing the work like that. So
right.
Let's talk about first of all, HNC and the maintenance dredging. Did that boat have any trouble getting up?
No. The Kid didn't have any trouble getting in. Of course, it doesn't draw very much water.
I was just joking.
The fishing vessel going out,
the big old vessel.
8 months ago, a year ago, whenever, it had a lot of problems, but it drafts with the floats and the dry dock under it. I think it drafted like 17 to 18 feet. We only have a 15-foot channel now. When you say 15 feet, some areas are deeper than others. 15 would be the shallowest, and so they got it out, but they stirred up a lot of mud.
They did some of your work for
it. Oh yeah, they moved it around, and they didn't get rid of it. They just moved it around. But
so and that's the plan, right? As we're talking about dredging and maintenance, eventually we're going to get that to 20 feet.
Exactly, and that's what we're working.
Probably go down to 22, right?
Well, they over dredge. They call it advanced maintenance. They allow you to go 2 to 3 feet more when you dredge it, so that it takes longer to have to come back. It lasts a little longer. So and the northern sections from the Intercoastal all the way to Cocodrie, it really never silts in unless like Ida silted it in.
Right.
But normally it doesn't silt in, so it's just the bay area. And whenever we dredge the bay, we dredge it to 20 feet because it's just the nature of the beast. I mean, it fills in so fast that Corps allows us to do that, you know, and so we got to get those rocks on the east side of the channel to stop that migration of the material into the channel. It's what the problem's always been. You know, I have some old documents. In 1937, Terrebonne Bay was only 2 miles in diameter. Okay, wow. And
now it's open water.
And now it's 12 miles maybe in diameter. So it's eroding more and more. And I think if we put a row of rocks from Timberlake Island all the way to Cocodrie, I just kind of believe that forward erosion with the northern bank will slow down.
Right.
You know, the two lobes, let's call them, two lakes. Once you put the jetty in the middle, won't have as much what they call fetch and wave. With the water just sloshing up against the bank, it's going to be a little less because it's not as much water.
It won't be 12 miles of slosh.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I'm just got my fingers crossed. I've been applying for grants for about 3 or 4 years now, federal grants. I just found out that I didn't get one of them this year, but I have one more to go. So I got my fingers crossed. One of these times we're gonna luck out and get it. That one's for 20-something million to put a jetty from Timberlake Island coming north about 1.5 miles. You know, and then
that would do a lot of good.
Yeah, and that would kind of buffer Timberlake Island falling in the channel.
Right.
And that's part of the problem, but it's not the whole problem.
Well, it's a good time for rocks, you know.
Yeah.
The 80s were a good time for rock and roll. Now it's a good time for rocks, right?
Right.
Another David asking for rocks, because David Cormandell's always asking for rocks down there.
David's my hero, man.
And he's proven it, right?
That's right. That's right.
We have seen it.
I tell the colonel, if he gets one rock, I want 2.
Exactly. All right. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more Going Public right after this.
Structural heart disease refers to a defect in the heart's valves, walls, or chambers that keeps the heart from pumping blood properly. Valve or structural heart problems may be present at birth or develop over time. Your risk increases if you have high blood pressure, plaque buildup, history of heart attack, take certain medications, or have certain heart infections. The Structural Heart Program at CIS and Terrebonne General provides innovative solutions and devices with the latest technology to bring the best possible outcomes for patients. Learn more at cardio.com.
Everybody, welcome back to Going Public. Harry McCullough here. We're with David Ravelet. He's the Executive Director of the Terrebonne Port Commission. We talked about dredging. Let's talk about deepening, which are two different things, right, Dave?
Well, it still involves dredging,
right.
But the first one we talked about was the maintenance dredging, that we have to maintain the channel every year, and it involves the dredging. But we got authorized in 2020, December of 2020, to deepen the channel from 15 feet to 20 feet. And we're preparing for that right now. We're low. You have to go through the whole channel. It's 36, 37 miles long, and identify every pipeline. So the first thing we do is we research the clerk of court. We get all the right-of-ways and the permits that associated with the channel, and then we start looking for those pipelines, and we do mag surveys, we do sub-bottom profiles, they do a lot of that kind of stuff, the electronic stuff, and then they locate what they think are pipelines. Okay, so in the bay we found 16 of them. Okay, and once they identify them, then they have to physically go out in the field with a probing rod and probe them to determine the depth. Okay, so then we take that data and we go sit down with the Corps, because they kind of regulate the amount of cover that you have to have over them by law. So we sit down with them, but that amount of cover changed in the recent couple of years. It went from like 8 feet of cover to 15 feet of cover. Okay, so Some of them they allow us to grandfather in if they have at least 8 feet of cover, and they'll allow us to leave it and not have to lower it. But if it's any shallower than that, then we got to lower it down to 15.
So if it's going to 20, it'd be a 35-foot depth it needs to go to. Right?
Exactly.
The 20 plus the 15.
Exactly. So it's just.
So that's a lot of work for a lot.
Yeah.
16 pipelines.
Probing those pipelines are not fun. Okay, it's a big probing rod, and but it has to be done, and they we found, like I said, we found 16 of them in the bay. All of them do not have to be lowered. Some of them they're gonna allow them to stay, but some of them we will have to lower. We're working right now with the Corps and the pipeline companies to try to start one of them, and it's a lot of of course they don't want to pay for it. Right. Okay, I can't blame them, but their right-of-way documents and their permits pretty much say that if it impedes navigation, that they're responsible for lowering it. So we're on the verge of getting that straight with the Corps and actually going meet with the company. We're going to pick one of them because we want to set a precedent and, work our way through that first one. And once we have that etched in stone and working, then we can go after all the other ones.
I would imagine pipelines, mostly oil and gas coming in from offshore. That's big companies we're talking about. That's not mom and pop shops.
Right, that's pipeline companies.
Right, that's big companies.
Kinder Morgan, I don't even remember.
That doesn't come into the loop and all that kind of stuff.
No,
that's further down.
This is just moving product from one area to the other.
Right.
We have
a Colonial pipeline out of Baton Rouge.
Yeah, we have a 30-inch, we have a 24-inch. I mean, you're talking about pipelines that are.
So to move those down 15 feet would be a lot of work too.
That's correct. There's two ways they can do it. They can either lift it, cut it, put a spool piece, like 90 it down and bury that piece, or they can directionally bore them. They can just abandon the line that's there and just directionally bore it, to get, maybe a half a mile from the channel, and they just go down with the directional boring and then make sure they get it deep enough and then they come up on the other side and whatever, so wow. That's how they do that.
So they say they don't want to pay for it, but that would eventually be paid back to those companies, or no?
No. The way the permit reads and the way the right-of-way agreement reads, it says that if it's impeding navigation, it's their cost.
Right.
Their argument is that we're encroaching on their right-of-way. Okay. So we'll just have to work through it.
So you have to do the 16 times just in the bay alone.
Well, not 16. We found 16, but we don't have to lower all 16.
I got you.
I think we got 9 of them that we have to lower. Okay, so then we moved from Cogadree going north, and we found 43. Okay, some of them are sewer lines, some of them water lines, some of them are pipelines, some of them are electrical conduits.
Right.
Okay, so we have to, and we're in the process now of probing all of those to determine the depth. We have not determined the depth of those. It's a little easier probing them in the channel inside than it is in the middle of the bay, but it's just part of the process. So what they're telling me now is they planned on probing 37 lines out of the 43.
Wow. Now, does that have to wait for the Bubba Dove, the lock system, or can that go ahead?
No, we can lower the pipelines now. We just, the rule or the stipulation that was set in place is that before we can dredge and dig it down to 20 feet, the lock and flood gate has to be in place and operable.
Well, they'll be starting 25. Right?
Yeah, they're getting ready to start that. So we kind of used that as our goal, just because it was easy to use.
Right.
But I'm not sure we're going to make that. We're going to do the best we can.
Right.
But it's going to take what it's going to take.
Sure. A lot of work ahead for sure as we get a couple of things meeting all at once. All right, we'll take another break. We'll be right back with more Going Public right after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Going Public. Harry McCullough here. We're spending our final segment with David Ravelet of the Terrebonne Port Commission. Something goes hand in hand around here are the levee districts. And one of the guys we're very familiar with, Reggie Dupre, is retiring or did retire on the 1st. And down at St. Anne's in Berg, they had a little party for him, and you were there, right?
Yeah, it was great. They had, I must have had, I'm guessing, but probably 100 people there. And they had, Gordy, Michelle, Jason, Garrett Graves was there. Just the list was really, really thick of, all the people there. And, I mean, Reggie did, well, I'll say Reggie, that whole levee district, I mean, I don't want to give him all the credit, but he was definitely the driving force. And they did what everybody said was never going to get done. You remember how long we were sitting there? We had these little potato levees here, all over. And, every time we'd have a tropical storm or even a south wind for 3 days, people were flooding. And they finally, the state stepped up and we taxed ourselves. We taxed ourselves, and the state matched it. We taxed ourselves twice. And I think I heard Reggie say last night there's like $1.1 billion on the ground now, okay? And it's just about all the way complete as far as from point A to point B. It's not as high as we want it. They can't do it all at one time, so they do it in lifts of 3 or 4 feet of material, maybe 5 feet of material to let it sit. It compacts. It probably sinks a couple feet, and then they come back. And at a later date, and it's all dependent on the funding and how much funding we get. So,
they've done a good job of learning, experimenting, and kind of getting around or working with the Corps. And I don't want to say getting around, but using, dirt and stuff from around this area instead of trying to go and bring it and the expense of all that. But look, I mean, you go back to Morganza de Golf was like 30 years ago with, Tozan Bro.
Exactly.
And we're seeing the results because we didn't want to wait around for the Corps to do it or the feds to do it. We're doing it ourselves. When those guys are responsible.
When they first started, dealing with it and trying to get it started and everything, I mean, the Corps fought them tooth and nail. Right. I mean, they couldn't turn around. Every time it was always some different regulation. I think they got authorized 2 or 3 times, before they finally got started. And but now, the colonel was there last night at Reggie's and gave him a little award and everything else, Colonel Jones. And, every colonel comes in for 3 years and leaves, and as time went by and they did more and more, now they just work together so well, I mean, they tell the colonel what they need, when they want to do. The colonel goes back and tries to get the money that they need and then and give them any assistance they need. Right. So especially this colonel, Colonel Jones, he's pretty great, pretty good. I mean, I really like him,
So we were talking about, you guys are not exactly the same, the Corps and the Port Commission, but you do work hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
You're more of an economic driver for the community. They're more of a safety for people.
Right. We're an economic driver for industry, but right in the middle and something that has everything to do with what we do is the channel depth. Mm-hmm. And the Corps is in charge of the dredging. Okay, it's a federal channel, and they're required to do the maintenance. So, I mean, look, we've had some bad years where we didn't have money from the federal government. It wasn't the Corps' fault here. It was mainly from the feds. But I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, we started getting the adequate funding, and it's been working very well. And we've been, trying to stay on top of it and keep it as close to 15 as we can every year. And now, like we just talked about, we got authorized to go to 20. So once we get all the pipelines identified and lowered and get all of that out of the way, we're gonna start dredging.
Yeah. No, that's good.
We've already signed a cost share agreement between the Corps, the state, the parish, and the port. So the funding is there. It's not in place, but the funding agreement is in place, which you need before you can get any funding. And then it's just a matter of once we get everything done, is just try to get the money. It's like a couple hundred, 250 million, that we're gonna need, and so.
On the way.
And we just talking about that. We just every year we got to submit a request to our delegation for the district, New Orleans district, to do the work that they need to do. They make their request on their side directly to the Corps in Washington. We make that same request to our delegation. Our delegation sends a wish list to the Corps, and then they match it up with what came from the Corps. And so Scalise and Garrett just approved or just agreed with the request for $3.125 million. That's what the Corps wants for next year, and they both approved it and blessed it and sent it up the chain. Now we just got to wait for the Senate to do the same thing, and hopefully everything works out and it comes out what they call a work plan. Like the budget's already set by the budget, but then they take that budget and that's where they get all, everybody gets their what they need, right. and they make sure they have enough money, and so we're excited. We just got notice that our Republican delegation in the House approved that, and now we're just waiting on the Senate.
We're good to go. A lot of good things happening, and like I say, a lot of work that we'll see for the next 5, 10, 50 years.
Who knows?
For sure. Well, David Rabelais, thanks so much for the update. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. More Going Public after this.
Structural heart disease refers to a defect in the heart's valves, walls, or chambers that keeps the heart from pumping blood properly. Valve or structural heart problems may be present at birth or develop over time. Your risk increases if you have high blood pressure, plaque buildup, history of heart attack, take certain medications, or have certain heart infections. The Structural Heart Program at CIS and Terrebonne General provides innovative solutions and devices with the latest technology to bring the best possible outcomes for patients. Learn more at cardio.com.